Okay, good afternoon. Hi, everybody. Thanks all for coming to the November chapter meeting. This is the midday edition, post Night at the Fights. Thank you all for laundering your suits before coming here. We appreciate that. Yeah. Let's see. Thank you to our gavel sponsors. Again, without your support, this program and all of our morning breakfasts that we usually do are not possible. So, when possible, support the companies on this slide. We appreciate your support of the chapter. Support the PAC too. Really, just open up your wallets anytime possible for NAOP. So, support our sponsors. Support the PAC. That's a personal donation. For those of you that weren't aware, the Night at the Fights proceeds went to the PAC. We're trying to build a war chest for all of the advocacy work that we're trying to accomplish on behalf of our members. And a big part of that is energy policy, which we're here today to learn more about. But obviously, we've got planning and zoning issues, we've got DEP, we got permitting of all sorts, energy, and we need resources to do that. So your support of the PAC is important. Some notable calendar dates, please save the date. We got the holiday party coming up, ski outing, chapter meetings. We're trying to keep your schedules full. So please note these dates and keep an eye out for the emails as the announcements come out. Speaking of the holiday party, this is our final official chapter meeting of the year. It is a members-only event because we take action on who's going to represent us on the board next year and officers, and it's a great time. So I'd encourage you to register, and if you are not a member and you plan on going to this event, we have ways of changing that, and you can become a member. So please go online and become a member. If you're not sure if you're a member, Erica is in the back, and you met her on the way in. She can check for you. Also note, December 9th is our quarterly chapter-wide, I think maybe this is our third one of the year, so it's trimesters. But it's our advocacy update. We sent out a survey to members, and one of the consistent messages we got back was that you all want to hear more about the advocacy work that we're doing. So this is our way of communicating to you on what we're up to. It's an hour-long event that it'll be members only. You can register, and then you'll get a link to the Zoom for the call. I think the last one we had about 40 people on, and we got a lot of good feedback. It wasn't just us, telling you what we were up to. We want to hear from you as well on your stories that you're seeing from the field, from your projects, and that can help steer our advocacy agenda. So we appreciate your participation in that. And we have a lot going on. Our joint event with BOMA, January, featuring Gus Fauché, everyone's favorite economic prognosticator from PNC. Gus is joining us again. We're going to try and pair Gus up with someone. We're waiting on some feedback from a couple other guests. But if it's just Gus is a wealth of knowledge and it'll be full of spreadsheets and bar charts that are always difficult to read from distance, but we trust in Gus's message. Ski outing, always a popular event. Save the date. Notice is coming out for that, January 30th. And a link to join NAOP for those of you QR inclined. There's the barcode. But I do encourage you to join. Typically, the end of the year, we see membership drop off just because memberships expire and people forget to renew. So be aware of that. If someone else in your company is responsible for renewing memberships, we don't want your membership to lapse. Today's event is one I've been looking forward to. We've been hinting at energy advocacy, energy policy updates, and we usually do a Harrisburg update generally. And before I introduce the panel, I'm going to bring David Caligiuri up to give an update on the state stuff. But today's event is one that I think it's going to get wonky, let me just say that, but in the best way possible. So, Dave, why don't you come up? He's got a couple updates on the budget. For those of you who don't know, Dave Caligiuri is our what are you? You're our lobbyist, our expert. We don't pay him much. We get what we pay for. Thanks, Dave.
That's the second time today I've been called out, by the way. Jeez, thanks. I'm going to make this as wonky as possible so that you'll understand. So quick advocacy update. So first off, since we last met, we've officially elected a new mayor in the city of Pittsburgh, Corey O'Connor. If you want to clap, go ahead. I will. Sorry. Yeah. Corey O'Connor will be taking office the first week of January, which is exciting. And if you've been paying attention, I think you've noticed that some of his appointments are not new to government, and actually to the chief of staff, where Dan Gilman has been announced as his chief of staff. So I think it's exciting that there's going to be some familiarity with us and with that position, unlike what we've had, I think, the last 4 years. So that's encouraging. We also have a new council member, Kim Salinetro. Kim had been the chief of staff for the past 16 years to Teresa Kell Smith. So she is she's not a newcomer to city council as well, and I think Kim is a friend of NAOPS, so that's also encouraging. Real quick on the budget, the state finally did pass a budget since our last meeting, which is exciting. And there's a couple things that I just want to touch base on, but if I'm not wonky enough, Bill and Amy from the chamber are here, and they actually have a great synopsis on their website of the governor's budget address, or the governor's budget, and things that you should take note of. So one, real quick, this budget maintains the current phase-down schedule for the corporate net income tax, which is encouraging for business. There's been some new permitting reform, which we're all very excited about. This basically requires that certain permits be deemed approved if they're not done within a certain amount of time. That's very vague, I know, but that's the government. They haven't really defined all of them. There is some that have been defined. Air quality permitting, those, if they're not done within 30 days, they'll be deemed approved, but you'll have an additional 5 days to work out any deficiencies. It's good that it's speeding this up. NPDES permitting has also been updated a little bit to make that more efficient and effective. Specifically with discharges of stormwater associated with industrial activities, discharges with small flow treatment facilities, discharges from petroleum products, contaminated groundwater remediation system, and wet weather overflow. So that's encouraging in relation to NPDES. The SPEED program, the governor's SPEED program, has also made some changes. One of them is the third-party review for certain projects, so that should also help speed up some permitting in that respect. There's transparency and accountability within the state permitting, so you will be able to go on websites and find out when you've applied for the permit, where it is in that whole process. I'm sure that's going to work really well. Reggie is all but dead, I guess, which is the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. So Pennsylvania is pulling out of that. And Reggie, if you're not familiar, is a multi-state carbon cap and trade program. Let's see, what else is important? There's been some money put in education, which is great. We all care about education. And then lastly, I'll just touch upon that there is a new $10 million affordable housing tax credit program that's going to be administered by FIA. So if you have any questions and you're not a member, you can still reach out to me. I'm not as elitist as our board chair. Thank you.
Thanks, David. All right. More. By the way, we'll dive into more detail on the advocacy update call. As a chapter, we were very supportive of the third-party plan review and encourage the design firms in the room to participate and continue to give us your feedback to make sure that the program is doing what everyone thinks it should be doing. Sometimes those two things don't align. So it is my pleasure to welcome our speakers today. Let's start with Amy. Amy Brinton is Director of Government Affairs at the PA Chamber. Come on up, Amy. Amy's an energy expert. She's from Indiana County, and I've seen her on a couple panels now on behalf of the Chamber, and is a wealth of knowledge on the energy side. So we welcome Amy. Ben Bush is new at the Allegheny Conference. Come on up, Ben. Ben hails from formerly at Lawrence County Chamber, so he's brand new at the conference, and we appreciate the conference and their support of all of our advocacy initiatives and the things that we're trying to change in the region and the city. So we welcome Ben. And of course, Jeff Burd is a familiar face, I think, to all of us. Come on up, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff. Jeff is a longtime industry veteran as a journalist, as a keeper of market data. Jeff runs the Developing Pittsburgh, for us, if you're a member, you get that twice a year magazine. And Jeff ran an excellent article on energy policy, I think in the fall edition. If you haven't seen it, it is a deep dive, but he covers it in the way that he does very well, which makes it understandable to all of us. So for as the experts on the stage that are going to dive pretty deep, Jeff is here to keep us in a space that we can all understand. And so we've got a great panel today, and one I'm particularly excited about. So thank you.
Good luck with that. I'm told this is this on?
It's on.
So I can be heard. Nate, since we're a little wonky on schedule, to use your word, when would you like questions and answers to start?
We'll probably go maybe 10 minutes over, so we'll start at maybe 5 after 1.
Would somebody here, my phone is in my pocket. Alyssa, would you be willing to step out of character and tell me what to do? Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Hey, no more moderator when I'm president.
That was a strategic move on my part. So when I was asked to do this, Tom said, listen, why don't you take 5 minutes and sort of do an overview? God help us if it takes 5 minutes, because the smart people are over here. So this topic got on my radar last year. Well, I can point them out from a few people in this room. Those of you that read this magazine, Breaking Ground, the one that I no longer publish but used to, this was our March edition. If you want to read in detail from what some really smart people said about this topic, energy and the energy infrastructure and its problems, the MBA has these on their site. The aforementioned fall edition, which the advocacy edition of Developing Pittsburgh, if you want to read more about the energy shortage, it's in this edition. You can download it from NAOP's website. It's this topic of energy and energy shortages have been kicking around for a while, but it's a real thing now. This hit home with me at your banquet, standing around with a couple of your members who are in this room talking about projects that were lost. Not the opportunity to compete for projects, but projects that were signed, sealed, almost delivered, when at the 11th hour they were told, sorry, we can't get you the power, or we can't get it to you for 2 years. And this was not something that would have come up in due diligence. It was kind of a oops by the power company. So for all the talk about data centers, the real power issue was already here. And it's a function of the fact that we're all electrifying things that would used to be not electrified. And we have not increased sufficiently. In fact, we've decreased the supply of energy. So the shortage is a function basically of policies that had intended and unintended consequences that have dramatically affected the energy infrastructure. We've decommissioned coal-fired plants. Those that are running are not running anywhere near at full capacity. There's been, an aversion to cutting over from coal to gas at the policy level. And then there were a bunch of incentives for alternative energy that created a backlog of things for projects that weren't ready, but you could go stand in line. Pennsylvania, as you're going to hear in a moment, it operates differently today than it did prior to 1996 when things were deregulated. The deregulation uncoupled generation from distribution, and that has led to a two-headed problem: the insufficient baseload generation and insufficient distribution and grid, which brings us to PJM Interconnect. PJM is the outfit that operates the grid on which Duquesne Light and West Penn Power distribute you the electricity. They also purchase the electricity from the generators, and they're the gatekeeper for who gets on the grid. This is not a small process. This is a multi-year process, not suggesting it has to be, but it is. And it's one that is really kind of where the bottleneck is now. We'll let some other folks tell you about it. Ultimately, this falls back on the PUC, the Pennsylvania Utility Commission. It was enabled, our current environment was enabled by the Pennsylvania utility legislation or the PUC law. Their rules have a way of restricting and inhibiting, or at least restraining utility companies from building spec service. You and I, if we knew there was going to be a new airport built, would consider investing in that area for the business that was to come. The utility companies can't do that. They're required to build only for paying customers, which means that if you have a spec project coming up, you have to either as a developer pony up or find a tenant who's going to be willing to pony up in advance to get somebody to build something. So I'll take two paragraphs here that were from this article in November that kind of summarize the problem, or at least where we are to kick off this program. Sorry, I'm going to read them verbatim. Compounding the regulatory issues for the utility companies, the legislated means for getting power to customers in Pennsylvania makes solving the problem more difficult. Like in other states, Pennsylvania customers get their electricity from regional distributors, in this case, Duquesne Light or West Penn Power. But power is generated by firms that sell to the multi-state grid operator. In its effort to shield Pennsylvania residents from potential price gouging by monopolistic utility companies, the legislature established a system that creates very few incentives and more than a few disincentives for risk-taking by the generators or the distributing utilities. The solution to the problem would seem to be simple: change the Public Utility Code. But that requires getting a divided government to elevate the power shortage as a priority ahead of the many other problems before the lawmakers. The problem is we're not making enough noise. So with that, I'm going to kick this over to Amy to ask her to sort of outline what's the energy landscape like in a little bit more detail than I just went in.
I don't know. You did a pretty good job. Maybe I'll touch a little bit, kind of go back to deregulation and explain that in PJM just a little more, just to, so the wonkiness doesn't get too wonky. I'll try to do it at a higher level.
Get in the weeds.
So as Jeff said, in 1996, we had something here in Pennsylvania called deregulation. A lot of times when you're hearing energy speak or conversations related to energy in Pennsylvania and other states, you'll hear vertically integrated states or deregulated states. So the vertically integrated states are those states in the country who they allow the generators to own and operate and distribute. So a lot of times their public utility, like their Duquesne Light, will also have generation assets. However, in 1996, the deregulation decoupled that. So here in Pennsylvania, legally, the electric distribution companies, and I should have gotten like a glossary of terms or a glossary of, what do I want to say, the acronyms, so you'll hear EDCs, electric distribution companies. So 1996 decoupled that, so the electric distribution companies in Pennsylvania are not allowed legally, again, to own or operate generation. So a lot of them, including West Penn Power, Duquesne Light, sold off their generation assets and are just transmission and distribution, or T&D. This also created the competitive energy market and allowed retail customers to choose the electric generation supplier. So when you all go out on the website and choose your supplier, that is what happened with deregulation. You're able to go out and choose your supplier, change. You're not automatically required to go with Duquesne Light, West Penn Power, or whatever EDC serves your area. So that's kind of in a nutshell deregulation to help kind of set the stage. Then there's PJM. PJM is our regional grid, so that's regional transmission operator, another term, RTO, you'll hear, and operates in 13 states, including Pennsylvania, and then DC is also part of that. So they ensure that the electricity supply and demand are balanced in real time and manage the system stability. They're a nonprofit, so they don't make any money in the energy space. They do run the wholesale market, competitive markets for buying and selling the electricity to the electric distribution companies. They also are responsible for transmission planning and the integration of diverse energy sources, including the renewables. That's another thing you hear a few different terms, base load You'll hear in the energy speak and intermittent resources. So the baseload sources are what we typically think as our fossil fuels historically. You're no longer allowed to call them fossil fuels. So they're baseload services. So coal, natural gas, nuclear, the three that are just consistently available to pull on. Intermittent, obviously kind of, the name kind of says it, the solar, the wind, those that are not, they're only producing when the sun's out or when the wind's blowing. So essentially PJM acts as the traffic controller for electricity, making sure that the power flows efficiently and reliability from the producers to consumers. So having said that, what is our landscape? Something we call the energy chain here in Pennsylvania, we are uniquely positioned that we're number one in electricity exporting in the country. We are number two in natural gas production in the country, and number three in energy producing. So we are basically, and maybe a pun is intended, an electric powerhouse here in Pennsylvania. Everywhere from natural gas wells, midstream, which is the pipes delivering the natural gas and the coal, down to the suppliers, power plants, then go on to the transmission and distribution companies, and then the whole way down to the end user. So that's what we call the electric energy chain, I'm sorry. I have to make sure I have notes, because I'm that person that I'll have the jerk store moment for those of you that are Seinfeld fans and can follow me, so sorry, I have to cheat a little bit.
Excellent reference.
So here in Pennsylvania, we historically have had coal as our primary energy source. And as Jeff alluded to, over the years, policy has kind of caused the coal-fired power plants to come offline. They're just not economically feasible due to carbon taxes and other carbon neutral policies that have been enacted. So luckily, in the early 2000s, we had something called fracking kind of expand the natural gas resources here in Pennsylvania. And between 2005 and 2020, we reduced our carbon footprint by about 46% because of the kind of switch over from coal to natural gas. And of course now natural gas is the primary energy source here in Pennsylvania. So we still have a lot of solar. I lived in Western PA for half of my life and Pittsburgh for a few years. I know how sunny it is out here. The perfect Western PA day out here. With intermittent resources, again, the only time you're producing energy is when the sun is out. And with electricity, electrons have to be used as soon as they're produced. The battery storage technology just is not there to power the grid. So there's no way you could just scientifically or mechanically power our grid with intermittent resources. So that's why you need coal, natural gas, and nuclear power as those baseload sources to continue to power the grid. And that's kind of the issue with all the coal-fired power plants coming on. There have not been enough new generation projects to fill the gaps from those exiting the grid. And again, you can't fill the gaps with intermittent resources. So PJM actually came out with a report in 2023 that estimated by 2027, which is only about 2 years away now, that we will be facing a 30 gigawatt shortfall. And you think, what's a gigawatt? A gigawatt, I equate it, you probably could power about 1 million homes with 1 gigawatt of power. So 30 gigawatts is a big chunk of potential shortfall. And that was even before data centers. With the recent data center boom or potential data center boom, I think they've increased it to 40 some gigs of potential generation shortfall. And I know we'll talk about Reggie here in a little bit and the impacts, but there was a lot of talk of why there weren't new projects becoming online. And Reggie was one of the uncertainty that the natural gas or the power plants would have to be impacted by the carbon taxes that Reggie would impose. a lot of people felt was a deterrent for building new generation here in Pennsylvania. So that's kind of, I think I covered everything as far as landscape and kind of how we got here. So not sure if you want me to go into anything or if I missed anything.
Probably the only thing I would say is the incentives that were created during the Biden administration for alternative energy sources created a backlog in that PJM's queue was determined by not first to be ready, but first in. So there were, I forget the number, it was all but 2, I think, projects in the queue were wind or solar. They made a rule change at the end of last year, or I guess the previous year that went into effect, that they're changing that now to first ready, first served. At that moment, roughly 75% of the projects that were in the queue said, never mind. So that's helpful, but it's part of the reason why you have a backlog. Okay, so we've kind of identified the problem here. But I guess, Ben, what's the big deal? I mean, is this a problem for economic development and business attraction? Could you name a couple problems that this is causing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as far as economic development is concerned, it threatens business attraction, it threatens site readiness, and it threatens business retention and expansion. If we're looking at a 30 gigawatt shortage by 2030, we won't be able to have our sites ready. Even if we have the sites ready, the question is, will you be able to get the power to the sites? So the state's done a lot, particularly surrounding permitting, a lot as far as investing in sites throughout the Commonwealth. But do we really want this power shortage to be what keeps us from being able to gain projects? When you look at business retention and expansion, if we have companies that are looking to add on 150,000 square feet of manufacturing and they require a significant load, but we can't get that load there, are they going to look at Ohio? Are they going to look at West Virginia? Are they going to look at New York and Texas and North Carolina? We have to make sure that we create policy at the state level that ensures that we have speed to power. At the end of the day, time is money. And these businesses need to get on as quick as possible. And in order to win these projects and keep our companies here, we just have to get quicker.
Explain that term you used there a bit. What is speed to power?
Well, the way I look at it is everybody in here knows what speed to market is. When you have tenants that are, it's important for them to get online and operating as quickly as humanly possible. So at the end of the day, it's important for us to ensure that we can get generation on the grid as quickly as humanly possible. And, policy shifts and permitting will help at the state level. We also need to look at policy shifts in NEPA at the federal level. And, we need to incentivize manufacturing of grid components within the United States and Pennsylvania, because right now, even if you could permit a plant, it takes you 5 years to get a turbine. So, we have to do some things that are going to be compelling to push more power generation onto the grid.
And when he says NEPA, I know this. I'm trying to highlight the
thank
acronym.
you.
So that is the National Environmental Protection Act. So that a lot of environmental protection stuff held in there. There's also a constitutional amendment in the Pennsylvania Constitution that is separate from that requires, and I can't remember what that acronym is off the top of my head, of course, but that also, it ensures that every person in the Commonwealth has the right to clean air, clean water. So there are a lot of issues with that in the permitting of these projects. We hear a lot of developers that I've heard of have issues with permitting and getting things done with that. So if any of you have any questions, I'm happy to go into that at a later time.
Well, Ben, if you don't mind, take us back in the time capsule 90 days ago when you were trying to convince people to locate in Lawrence County. Is this an issue that comes up? I mean, do businesses ask about this? How does this kind of play at the local level where your boots are on the ground?
So at the end of the day, when I have a company that's coming in looking at a site, I have to go through the process of, do we have everything they need? Everything, do I have enough water capacity? Do I have enough sewer capacity? Can we get enough electrons to the site so that they can, perform their business? And time is always the biggest issue, right? So the first thing you have to do is a conceptual load study, and then you have to do a detailed load study, and then you get the number, right? So it might cost you $1 million, it might cost you 10 million, it might not cost you anything, right? There might be enough electrons at the site, but at the end of the day, we have to know what that number is, and either the company is going to put that up, the developer is going to put that up, or there's an opportunity with PA sites and other programs for investing in these sites in the Commonwealth that we can move forward. But at the end of the day, somebody has to pay that bill. So it becomes a real issue. If I can't get power to a site, I can't develop a site. I can't pull businesses into a community. I can't have jobs in the community. So time's a big issue, and money to develop the infrastructure is a huge issue.
Thank you. Well, let's talk about what's going on at the state legislature. Now that they've passed a budget, imagine they're looking for things to do. Take a minute. What is the impact of our leaving, in quotes, Reggie? How is that beneficial to solving the problem we're talking about?
100%. Amy mentioned it earlier, and everybody in this room who is in the development world understands that certainty in investment is huge. If you look at Pennsylvania, I think the last generation plant that was built in Pennsylvania was 2016. Governor Wolf put us into Reggie in 2019, and since then we haven't had a single baseload generation project built in the Commonwealth. You can go to Ohio, they've built 2. You can go to West Virginia, just this month, they just approved the construction of another 500 megawatt gas power plant. And so all the while Reggie is looming over everyone's head, investors aren't going to invest. And because we have the regional transmission system, if I know that I can go to Ohio or I can go to West Virginia and put electrons on the grid and they're going to get to Pennsylvania, but I'm not going to have to deal with the costs associated with Reggie, I'm going to go to Ohio and I'm going to go to West Virginia to build. So certainty was the biggest piece. But the second piece, which I would say is probably as impactful, is it kind of set the stage for conversation around energy policy, right? Prior to Reggie being pulled or being exited from, we were in an environment where, you had 2 sides of the aisle that were at a stalemate. So now I think with Reggie being in the past, it'll set the stage for us to be able to have the conversation about specific policies at the state level that can increase speed to power, that can make sure that we increase our generation capacity within the Commonwealth.
Well, Amy, obviously along those lines, are there any specific pieces of legislation or at least policy discussions that might lead to legislation that will be considered at this point?
I think there are a number of policies, and I think, for those of you who aren't familiar with the state legislature and the makeup, we've got the state Senate is controlled by the Republicans, and the state House is controlled by the Democrats. And not only are they controlled by the Democrats, they are controlled by the Democrats by 1. So you would think that would be an opportunity for more things, more negotiating, more opportunities for different things to get done, but it's actually resulted in the opposite, and not much has gotten done. And in addition, as Ben kind of alluded to, we've had a Senate Republican caucus who has been steadfast in that they've said we are not going to consider any energy legislation until Reggie is off the table. So now that that's happened, I think you're going to see the governor pushing a lot of his lightning plan bills. I know there was House Bill 501, which is the acronym for that one is PRESS, P-R-E-S-S, and I have the actual name of the what it stands for somewhere in my notes here. But essentially, it's the Alternative Energy Portfolio Standards Act, another acronym, AEPS, which requires the electric company, when they go out and purchase the energy for their customers, they have to purchase a certain percentage of Tier 1, Tier 2 energy sources. Tier 1 is your typical solar, hydro, wind. Tier 2 includes waste coal and a bunch of other kind of not your traditional alternative energy sources, but our alternative energy sources. That bill was set for a vote today, actually. But I know there's some negotiating that was going on for potential amendments that are being offered, and I think I think they pulled it, and it's not gonna be considered maybe until the next time they come into session. Another one, and I know Ben and I are on the same page, and I'll let you kind of get into reset, but reset board is another one of those pieces of legislation we're supportive of, which would create essentially a permitting authority. And we, the PA Chamber, are actually named in one of the board members as part of the reset board. So I'll let you talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so what the reset board does is allow permitting and siting of large-scale generation, I think it's above 25 megawatts, to go through a central authority. So any of you who have built around here know that you got to deal with, the unfortunate realities of the Commonwealth, and that we are a Commonwealth. So you're not going to have to go through all of the local, state, and federal permitting. There's going to be one location for review of the siting and the permitting, and hopefully by centralizing it, you create a situation where you can have efficiencies, and these projects can move much quicker throughout the process.
And to back up, I guess, for the governor's lightning plan includes 6 bills. And I think there are a few that we have been following, and I think 3 or so that really don't impact us. So we're kind of just touching on the ones that directly impact the various chambers. Another one is House Bill 500, which is the Pennsylvania Economic Development for a Growing Economy tax credit program, and that acronym is EDGE. And that one was established to incentivize the large-scale economic development projects that create significant job opportunities. They include, this update to this bill included reliable energy, geothermal, and sustainable aviation fuel, and then it reformed existing programs for regional clean hydrogen hubs and milk processing. So the tax credits are based on emissions intensity for clean energy projects at this point. And I'll let you, again, speak to your side of it, but the PA Chamber has been advocating and trying to work with the governor's staff and the House, where it just came out of the House. It's sitting in the Senate waiting for consideration. But we would like to see it fuel agnostic. So right now it basically is written so that it only benefits renewables and intermittent projects.
Yeah, we would completely agree with that. At the end of the day, the most important thing is base load generation, right? I want all the power, but the most critical need right now is base load generation. So your natural gas, your nuclear, and I even think that with the advancements in technology, that battery storage at some point here will have an ability to add to be a base load source in the future. But as we look forward to advancing technologies and SMRs and nuclear, at the end of the day, we need to incentivize as much of this base load generation to get to the grid as possible.
And I do think that the SMRs, there was also a hearing, and I think there's a bill related to SMRs being voted out of the committee in the House side either today or tomorrow. That is those emerging technologies. I think we'll see more support from the administration and the legislature on the emerging technology side of things.
Are there other bills? I seem to remember Senator Bartolotta had some, maybe she hasn't actually proposed it yet, some legislation around data centers.
There's a couple I'll touch on. So Senator Yaw has 2 bills. Senate Bill 704, Grid Stabilization and Security Act. This is requiring DCED to do research and cite the best locations throughout the Commonwealth for natural gas plants. We would love to see nuclear added to that as a base source generation. And I think the step after this is done is pre-permitting these sites. If we start pre-permitting sites for generation, at that point, when we have permits in hand, it's much easier to find the investment to move the market and get generators built. Another one is Senate Bill 187, which is the Independent Energy Office. We have an independent fiscal office at the state level right now, which currently pushes fiscal policy suggestions and research to the legislature. So having the ability to have an independent energy office that has the ability to research regulatory frameworks and how best to push policy out so that we get the results we want would be significantly beneficial. I think it's important that this bill passes and quickly because we only have 2.5 years till we become in a situation where we could be seeing brownouts. So those two bills I think are significantly important. And then you had mentioned Senator Bartolotta's bill, which is, I believe Senator Bartolotta and Representative Eric Nelson out of Westmoreland County both have similar pieces of legislation, and this would accelerate permitting of data centers. And really, at the end of the day, I think what this bill does is allows, in an industry like data centers where money isn't an issue, it increases the cost associated with the permitting, but it will also backfill through DEP the manpower to get these projects reviewed in a quicker manner.
Just to go back on the Independent Energy Office, the Senator Yaw bill, that's a huge priority that we've really been advocating for since it came out of the Senate. Oh my gosh, I want to say almost a year ago. It's been sitting in the House. It's crazy to think, I talked a little bit about how big of an energy powerhouse that Pennsylvania is. We do not have an energy strategy, an official energy strategy for Pennsylvania. There is not a roadmap. There is nothing from the administration or any of the different offices or departments in the state that gives us any kind of energy strategy or outlook, which to me just blows my mind. So that, I think, Senator Yaw is trying to figure out the best way to address that hole that we have. I know in the past there have been attempts to create an energy department in Pennsylvania. I think right now energy is so fragmented across all of the different departments throughout the state. DCED, DEP, even PennDOT I think has some energy-related folks. They're all in their little silos, and nobody wants to kind of give up what they have. So it's really difficult politically, I think, for that to happen, and then that would have to also be passed in legislation. And then that, again, politically, I just don't see that happening. It's a huge feat to do. So I think the best thing that we could advocate for to address the issue is the Independent Energy Office. On the data center side of things, one bill that we're highlighting that we are following is Senate Bill 939, just Senator Greg Rothman's bill, and it establishes a Commonwealth Opportunity Zone, or a COZ, COZ. There are also Keystone Opportunity Zones, which is KOZ. So this is a different cause. So it's a statewide regulatory relief program designed to position the Commonwealth for job creation for these data centers. We saw Senator McCormick announce a potential of $90.5 billion in investments. So that's great. Let's announce all, but you can announce all you can. How do we then get that development to come to Pennsylvania? We saw huge steps. Dave talked about permitting that got done with the budget. I mean, that's a huge first step. Expanding the speed program is another huge step. So the other step we need to do is fight the misnomers. There are a lot of NIMBYism out there of data centers. So that's the goal. We at the Chamber, we actually started, we launched a Pennsylvania Energy and Innovation Center to kind of support that and the messaging that's given to municipalities and data center companies and developers to help mitigate that negative information that's out there that we see. But Senator Rothman's bill would establish a statewide AI data center and emerging technologies regulatory sandbox, which enables industry leaders to work with state agencies directly. They would identify and remove any unnecessary and outdated regulations, streamlining development process, and placing certain data center developments under a fast-track permitting process. Again, permitting is key. We talked a little bit about that. Guaranteeing timely, predictable approval, ensuring quality, consistency. And then the bill also establishes reasonable ordinance parameters that allow data centers to operate under the same rules as similar industrial facilities while also preserving the local control. So that bill, there really hasn't been any kind of talk of it moving. However, we've seen, especially on the eastern side of the state, a lot of data centers getting shot down locally with ordinances. So that is something we're hoping to really talk to Senator Rothman about, trying to maybe get that bill some legs or do some education as we advocate for that.
One thing you mentioned, Amy, was the ability to remove outdated regulations. You know, one thing that I think is extremely important, and the administration has been great about this so far, working with business and industry to identify those problems and remove those barriers. I think I would love to see that at an energy generation, transmission distribution level, development of a team that's working directly with the administration to identify these outdated regulations and really try to create a framework that works for the Commonwealth.
And I know there have been some discussions, had a conversation with Senator Rothman on Friday just about things that might be coming up. An office of a repealer, creating an office of the repealer, which is essentially they would go through, try to find outdated rules, regulations, statutes that just don't make sense anymore. The story that was told to us on Friday in Texas, there is still a law on the books where anytime you are driving in the road, you have to have somebody out in front of you with a red flag waving to tell people. But they try to repeal it, but then the troopers always oppose it because for them it is probable cause and all the other, the legal things that come in. But there are still these crazy laws on the books. And I think there was one in Wyoming where if you bring a horse to school, the principal is in charge of the horse for the remainder of the day. So I think a group of funny students decided they were going to bring their horses to school one day, and the principal at least held to his side of the bargain. But there are crazy rules that are still out there, and that's one thing that they say they're looking at looking at.
Not even crazy rules, but how about regulation that just doesn't work?
Doesn't work.
Well, are there any other solutions that are not, currently in front of them? Are there solutions that either the conference or the chamber, the PA chamber, are looking at as, geez, we'd like to see this be done?
So when I look at our current energy policy priorities, incentivizing energy investment, and that is both on the generation side and the transmission and distribution side. So one thing that that a lot of times isn't touched on is that the transmission and distribution systems like a highway, you can only fit so many electrons down the highway at a time, just like you can only fit so many cars down the highway. And at the end of the day, there are advanced transmission technologies that would help us bolster our current transmission and distribution system. But the question becomes, are they economical yet, right? So in order to see these technologies introduced, I think it would be extremely important for even in the EDGE tax credit to make implications to be able to use for advanced transmission technologies. Because, okay, let's say we get another 30 grids of generation online. Are we going to be able to get it to where it needs to go? So a lot of times I think people aren't considering those facts. Outside of incentivizing energy investment, reforming permitting and siting is extremely important, and everybody in this room is familiar with that, even just on a general development level. Empowering a statewide energy team to really go through and identify the regulatory framework that doesn't work and help creation of new, and then aligning of the regulations to streamline things and move in a quicker manner. So that's where we sit.
Yeah, and I think we're right there with you. The only thing we also, and I'm sure you guys as well, workforce development is huge. Supporting the training programs to prepare workers. I know there's probably a shortage when these data centers, hopefully, when the data centers, I'm going to say when, not if, come to Pennsylvania, that there will be an adequate amount of workers to fill the positions needed for this here in Pennsylvania. So I know I don't handle workforce. My topic portfolio with the chamber is energy, environment, and permitting. So I get all the really fun stuff. But workforce.
You get all the stuff that NIOP wants to call you about.
That's right. Anytime, my phone and my computer are always available. But I have a colleague who does workforce, and that is something I know he's been working on is apprenticeship and the apprenticeship ratios. That's something that we hear from our members a lot about too. So that's on our radar. And of course, permitting reform, we had so incredibly excited for the budget. We got Reggie and we got permitting, which was huge in my book. But we still have work to do on permitting. So those efforts will continue. In the data center, as I said, with the Pennsylvania Energy and Innovation Institute, we're looking to do a whole campaign on data centers, PR campaign to help get those projects here. So that's another priority for us.
Well, it's huge because if you look at the majority of the data centers that are coming to Western Pennsylvania, they're bringing their own generation, right? So we keep talking about how important it is for us to generate. They are bringing their own generation, and they're also bringing family-sustaining jobs along with that generation. Part of fighting the NIMBYism is just getting to the facts, right? And I think that educating folks on the facts is a huge part of the roles that we can play at both the chamber and the conference.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of tinfoil hat conspiracies out there with the data centers that we want to really help to, kind of deconstruct those myths.
Well, before we go to questions, you've mentioned a number of the legislators' names here in the conversation. Many of the people in this room get the opportunity to visit with these legislatures, and they're expected to have their checkbooks open as long as they're having those kind of conversations. Who are the influential energy representatives and senators so that the next time you're handing a check off, you might say, oh, by the way?
So when it comes to energy, particularly when it came to exiting Reggie, I don't think that there was anybody in the Commonwealth that worked harder than Senator Joe Pittman. Very much so a energy advocate. And quite frankly, it's because his district was very energy heavy. He had the last 3 coal-fired power plants in his district and was fighting to keep that generation and those family-sustaining jobs. You look at Senator Gene Yaw. He's currently the chair of Environment and Energy in the Senate. He's been an advocate, particularly from everything from permitting and increasing generation, but also on the permitting side to the appeals process, which is a huge issue. He's been an advocate and really working with the EHB and trying to...
That's Environmental Hearing Board.
Thanks, Amy. Really working with the EHB to try to make sure that if we do reform, we do it in a manner that works. Besides that, Senator Kristen Phillips Hill, the permitting reforms that took place in the budget came out of Senate Bill 6, which she was a staunch advocate for, and she was also the author, I believe, of the speed bill last year that got put forward. Locally here, we have Representative Matsey, who sits on the Nuclear Caucus and is pushing nuclear energy as a baseload source forward. Particularly, they just held the hearing a couple of days ago on SMR technology. And then you look at Senator Bartolotta and Rep. Nelson as well.
Yeah, and I think Senator, I almost gave him a promotion. Representative Rob Matsey is Beaver County. He was the former chair of the Consumer Affairs Committee, which they divvied them up this session. So it used to encompass the energy policy, and he really, latched on to that and did a lot of work in the energy space as he was chair. But he was then elected to a leadership position. So he is currently in the Democratic leadership team. So he doesn't get to chair an actual committee, but he is still very influential in the caucus and in the energy space. And he's been a great advocate and a great friend. So I had to give him a little shout out. Greg Rothman, yes. Who had, I said, the Senate Bill 939. He's Cumberland County, so the Harrisburg area. Kristen Phillips Hill, who you mentioned, who funnily funnily, if that's a word. So you might hear her referred to as KPH. So Kristen Phillips Hill is that acronym.
I like how you put the acronym out.
I went backwards. I went backwards. She's an amazing advocate for permitting, and if you get to meet her, just a lovely person. And then actually Representative John Ingalls, who took Representative Nick Pisciatano, who is now Senator Pisciatano. Representative Ingalls took his seat. He has been really great. He's brand new as a freshman. I've loved working with him on the House Democratic majority side of things. Very, pragmatic, and will sit and talk to you. So if you see him, he's wonderful as well. And in the energy space, but he's a newbie, so he's still kind of getting his toes wet.
Very good. So Pisciatano doesn't have an acronym.
No, not that I'm aware of.
If there's a man that never needed one. So let's open up to the floor. Who has questions?
Great conversation. Thank you so much for your insights. You mentioned a little bit about tax credit programming that's been coming forward through the state. I know, full disclosure, I do a lot of work in the neighboring state to our west. Or left, right? Yeah, west. Yeah, you're welcome. And they just launched their $100 million Energy Opportunity Fund, in which they're giving direct grants to energy providers, projects, and utility operators to extend gas lines, as well as SMR hybrid projects. Do you see anything like that happening in the state from a direct infusion of cash, or are we still just be looking at the tax credit programs?
So I think there's a number of different projects or programs that would apply to be able to do this. PA Sites is one of them. I think that if you look at the H2O programs, PA Small Sewer and Water, if they would recapitalize it, the PIPES program, I think there's a significant ability to have direct grants. But one of the biggest things I think that the Commonwealth could do to spur large-scale projects, even energy, not only energy generation projects, but manufacturing projects alike, is a job creation tax credit, because you are essentially not taking anything away from the Commonwealth's revenue, and you are putting back into the pockets of the folks who are bringing jobs and increasing the economy.
Thanks. I'm working on 2 projects that are data center driven in other states, and we run into issues with the fiber network and the dark fiber. Has any conversation took place regarding that, so that you're prepared if a center does come on, that the fiber network availability is there?
I haven't heard anything on the fiber side of things. I know that the northeast section of Pennsylvania is targeted largely because there's a large fiber
Trunk
route
line.
that goes up through that corridor, New York to however far down it goes. But I have not heard legislation. There is I guess, when I say deregulation of fiber, it's a different kind of deregulation than what I talked about. There is a bill, House Bill 1233. I don't want to give you the wrong, that might be different. Don't quote me on that, actually. I'm going to retract that. I'll get you the bill. There is a bill out there. Actually, it's on the Senate side. 1233 is a battery recycling bill, so please don't, unless you're into battery recycling, have at it. That would replace the copper fiber, but I don't know that it's really at this point. I mean, maybe there's an opportunity there for, sometimes when you have a topic, there may be potential for amendments to be included that would address the issue. So maybe that's something, happy to connect. And I don't do the broadband in my issue either, but I can connect you with somebody on our team that would be able to kind of help.
So in the economic development lane, particularly when I was at Lawrence County, we had 2 sites that we pushed, and they both had good fiber lines. So I can't speak to outside of that if there's an issue. The one thing I guess I can speak to is there never seems to be a lack of money associated with the development in this, and that folks are more than happy to build out certain infrastructure needs. I think the biggest one that they just want to make sure they have the availability of the power.
I got one more to close this out if that's
Sure,
if we
go
got
ahead.
time. When solar incentives first started, it created this wealth of projects that you alluded to, Jeff, in the opening. which is the backlog at PJM. Municipalities in the state then responded by creating massive setbacks for utility scale, basically fighting utility scale solar. Data centers are coming online. Municipalities are responding by creating noise ordinances, setbacks, traffic, all the stuff to discourage data centers. And at the heart of our issue for sites is transmission, which is effectively local issues. Are we just teeing up a fight between legislation that's passed at the state level and municipalities that don't want to play ball?
I think the best solution there is education, right? The best thing we could do is go to PSATs, go to CCAP, and truly educate folks on these sites. I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday who had mentioned that they got the opportunity to go to Virginia and tour. They've done work on real estate development projects or data center projects, but never actually toured one. And noise is always an issue. Water consumption is an issue. With now closed loop systems being available, and they had mentioned they're sitting there and they had to actually ask to have the truck turned off so they could see if they could hear it. So I think if we as associations do our job in educating the folks who are making these decisions, it becomes a lot easier.
Yeah, and I think educating and within the education, communicating and magnifying the message, or getting that message out there, that there will be a demand for energy that these data centers will bring, but cost, I guess, this would probably go into a whole other hour conversation if I.
You
So
don't
I
have
should.
that.
I guess I should. I get back. I don't have that. Cost of the data centers being shared by consumers. A lot of consumers are afraid that they're going to have to pay for these data centers, which is not the case. So a lot of talk about that. Clearing that misnomer. And I think we need to really amplify the message of how economically beneficial this is, not only on the job side, but the property tax revenue. Down in Loudoun County, in Virginia, the data centers account for 3% of the land, taking up of the land. And I think they contributed 38% of the entire county budget. I think it was $870-some million in 1 year that they generated for it. So I don't hear those things being talked about. So finding those things that really resonate with people, I think, is one thing that we should be looking to do too.
Yeah, I mean, particularly if you look at a lot of the rural communities in the 10-county region, many of them have had expired coal plants and lost the tax base associated with that. So this is an ability to rebuild that and ensure that public services are, able to continue to thrive and move forward without having to raise taxes.
With a lower traffic impact than the average CVS.
Exactly.
So, but Nate, the correct answer to your question is yes. We will be creating situations where municipalities will be fighting with the state, so be it. That if only there was a commercial real estate association that could advocate for.
Or a statewide
Yes.
coalition that could do that too.
So on that happy note, first, thank you for your attention, for your interest, but let's thank our two panelists, Ben and Amy.
Thank you guys for having
Yes,
us.
thanks.
Thank you. We're adjourned. Thanks, everyone.